the monthly teachings that we do, and we thought it would be a good topic to talk about gut health and immunity. I hope you are safe and sound wherever you we're finding ourselves in, and I hope you find this educational. I'm not going to be talking about the COVID-19, but more you can do to help your own immune system. As of now, we don't know really anything about what types of herbs are specifically effective for COVID-19. So I'm not going to be talking about, I'll talk about some herbs that are good for the immune system in general, but I'm really not wanting to promote unproven strategies or sell things or any of that. It's not a good time for that at all. It's never a good time for that. So it's about understanding what happens with your immune system and how you can improve it. Just a bit of a background. We have an educational website called The SIBO Doctor, and there are courses there for practitioners as well as for patients or consumers that want to find out more about SIBO. But what I'll talk about today really is about gut health and the function of your immune system. As we know, a lot of the immune system actually exists in the digestive tract. So it's very important to understand that aspect of it. We do these educational teachings once a month, and then once a month we have a Q&A. So look out for the postings, and if you signed up to our email, we do alert you to those kinds of happenings. So, and they're always very engaging. But the teaching really is just about having some understanding. It's not so much about the Q&A that we do once a month. I'm just trying to find my way around this. Hang on just a second. I'm having a little issue with my platform. Should be okay. I'm hoping that you can all hear me. Maybe give me a little thumbs up if you can hear me, if there's any problems. Thank you. Okay, excellent. We've got already some people tuning in. So, all right, so let's talk about the immune system and the and digestive health. So first up, it's about mucosal immunity. And mucosal immunity, if you think about, you have mucosal surface from mouth to anus, right? Also, your lungs contain mucosal surface. And that's the first front that we have, or the first line of defense that we have against any sort of invader, whether that's a virus or a bacteria. And what happens along the digestive tract is that you may have heard this before, that about 80 to 90% of your immune system actually is in your digestive tract, and that's actually true. It's along the tube that is your gut, they're called little Peyer's patches. And I'll show you a photo here, or a graphic, and I will leave this up because it's a really good graphic to understand the immune system that's in your digestive tract. And it'll become a little clearer as we go along and how this really relates to what's happening right now. But people that have digestive issues also often get sick more often. And part of that is because the immune system that's below the mucosal surface, so what you're looking at, I'm hoping you can see my mouse, but right here is a Peyer's patch, right? So a Peyer's patch is a little hub where immune cells interact also with the microbiome. And what they do, there's a few cells called M cells. So let me just orient you. So up here, up above at the very top of the graphic is where food comes along, gets passed through the digestive tract. And there are particular cells that are lining the entire digestive tract called epithelial cells. And in between them, you have very specialized immune cells that kind of sample what's going on in the what's called lumen. That's the tube, the lumen. So these dendritic cells and M cells then report back to the Peyer's patch, which then launches either an immune response or not an immune response. So this is a healthy system where constantly your immune system is sampling what's happening and if they should launch an immune response. And 90% of the time, or even more than that, 99% of the time, your immune system is supposed to not react to the food that is coming along, right? So in a situation where you would have a lot of reaction, you would probably have a lot of food reactions and a lot of, well, we'll talk about leaky gut in a moment, but those are the more the gut immunity that is responding to what's happening in the lumen. But the mucosal surface of the digestive tract also communicates with other mucosal surfaces. And this will become important in a moment when we talk about the upper respiratory tract. But we have Peyer's patches, we have M cells, we have dendritic cells that are all important in mucosal defenses. Also, we have this little bone-like, little doggy bone kind of structure here called secretory IgA. And this is really the most important, I think, defense mechanism that we have in our mucosa. The secretory IgA is something that B cells secrete, and it's sort of like a little samurai that sits in your mucosa that is basically there to defend you from anything that's coming along that's a virus or a bacteria, right? So this is really the gist of mucosal defense systems. Now, when we go into the upper respiratory tract, one important thing that you may have heard about, something called the cytokine storm, and let me explain that in a moment, in a bit more detail. But when you have cells, T cells, or immune cells in the mucosa, how they communicate with each other is through little messengers called cytokines. And cytokines can be either inflammatory, activating and inflammatory, or anti-inflammatory. So it always depends on what's going on. A cytokine storm is really what happens when you have the flu. So when you have the flu, you feel terrible, you feel achy, you have a fever, and that's not the virus, that is your own immune system to the virus through something called a cytokine storm. The danger of COVID-19 is that immunocompromised people and the elderly can be really overwhelmed by this cytokine storm. So it's kind of like this dysregulated or overwhelming response from the immune system that seems to be a big problem when we're dealing with COVID-19. So what's important in the upper respiratory tract? So the upper respiratory mucosa also has the secretory IgA substances that are really our first line of defense, right? So the difference between getting a virus or not getting a virus is you actually being able to take it out before it actually takes hold. And that can be done through secretory IgA. Are specific for COVID-19 because we don't know how this bug or this virus, we're understanding it more as we go along, but we don't, I cannot really say that this is specific for COVID. So just so that you understand that, nor is it meant for medical advice, and you always need to check with your doctor before you do any kind of other protocol than what your doctor says. This is a disclaimer. So secretory IgA is very, very important. I'm going to hide this again. And I'll talk about in a moment how to increase secretory IgA. Your microbiome is also very important when it comes to mucosal health, and your nasal cavity actually has its own microbiome that's different from the microbiome that sits in your digestive tract. And one of the reasons, like I said, why people get ill when they have a lot of gut issues like leaky gut and food allergies, etc., is because their immune system is constantly busy fighting things that it shouldn't be fighting. And so it can't really launch a proper reaction very often when you have inflammation and other issues going on with your digestive system. And that's why gut health is so important for systemic health. So microbiome, I mean, these are much bigger issues that require much bigger conversations, really, on how to rebalance your microbiome and how to get healthy. And I'll talk more about that at the end. I've developed a course called the SIBO Success Plan that really teaches you how to maintain good gut health. And but anyways, this is more about upper respiratory tract health now. So how do we improve secretory IgA? And how do we improve mucosal immunity in the upper respiratory tract? Before we go into how we help out in those areas, we must talk about stress and the immune system, right? So stress in the immune system, stress is probably one of the most damaging aspects to health that you can imagine. What happens when you get stressed? When you get stressed, you secrete something called cortisol from your adrenal gland. And cortisol actually suppresses secretory IgA. So secretory IgA, again, is this kind of samurai that is your first line of defense in the mucosa, whether that's in your nose or whether that's in your gut. So secretory IgA is really important, and we want to improve the function of that. This stress is really one of the reasons why people get sick when they are really stressed or have a project due, or they are really overwhelmed with the uncertainty of the times. Like now, a lot of people are very, very destabilized, and it's difficult, and I can feel it myself. But all we really can do is none of us know how this whole thing is going to unfold. So that should not provide a sense of calm at all, but at least some sense that we're all truly in this together. So stress in the immune system is really, I think, one of the most important reasons why people get ill, is that they're really stressed out. I was listening to, and this is always the good time to follow people that you admire, or you get a lot of benefit, or you really resonate with. And one of the people I really resonate with is Liz Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and she wrote a number of books. But one of the posts that she posted a couple of days ago was about how to deal with trauma or stress or panic and overwhelm, which many people are feeling right now. And she called it the 5-4-3-2-1, which is a system or a mechanism or a method to really get you back into your body. So when you feel really panicked and you feel overwhelmed and you feel afraid, then getting back into the body is actually the easiest way to calm down. So 5-4-3-2-1 is about 5 things you see. So you look around and you look at 5 things you see. So I see the glass of water. I see the light that's around my camera. I see the door of my clinic room. I see my beautiful mermaid that I have sitting on my shelf over there. I see the flowers that are actually were made by my good friend and were gifted to me. So seeing that brings me into the present moment. 4 is 4 things you can feel. So I can feel my sweater on my skin. I can feel my slippers on my feet. I can feel the warmth of the room, and I can feel the hair on my neck. So feeling, sensing is a good way to get back again into the body and into the now. And that actually puts a brake on this automated fear response. 3 is the number of things you can, let me see, I think it's the number of things you can hear. So I can hear, there was a car just now driving by. I can hear a bird in the tree outside my window. And I can hear somebody putting a cup of tea into the sink in the kitchen here. 2 are the things you can smell. And funnily enough, this is a true story. Last September, I had a really terrible flu, and since then I really can't smell much. So this can also happen when you have the flu. You have some olfactory nerve damage. So I can't smell anything, unfortunately. One is the number of things you can taste. And I still can't taste fully because my sense of smell is gone, but I can taste a little bit of salt in the back of my throat. So now that I've seen, felt, heard, tasted, and smelled or not smelled, I'm much more in my body. So it's a good thing to remember. And I'm grateful to Liz Gilbert for posting that, because I think it's brilliant. You can do it anytime. It gets you back in the now. It gets you back in the body, wriggle your toes. It's a good, also the way to deal with trauma is to get back into the body. So also our hypnotherapist, Sarita Ford, is going to do a meditation class in the coming days, and you'll hear more about it on the SIBO Doctor Facebook page and also in the groups that are associated with this page. So we really want to provide ways to get back into the body and to calm your nervous system, because one big aspect of this whole situation is the deleterious effect of stress on the immune system. And it's sort of like probably one of the most important things you can do is to find ways to calm your nervous system. Okay, now let's get to actual immune support, right? So immune support, again, medical disclaimer, this is not medical advice. We always have to do that so that you know that I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just sharing my knowledge of what I know really works in times of when your immune system really needs some support to react to whatever is happening. Again, not specific to coronavirus, but there are a few things that I would consider taking, and I have recommended that to my patients. So, for example, probiotics, right? Because probiotics actually have a good body of evidence that they help to prevent common colds and flus. And this goes back to having this picture up that shows, for those of you who just joined us, mucosal immunity, right? So you've got your probiotics up here, or you've got your bacteria up here in the lumen, which is the tube of the digestive tract. But again, probiotics don't just work on the gut immune system and how they interact with our immune cells, and they either calm or stimulate, and they really have a place in cold and flu prevention, also in the upper respiratory tract, because as I've said before, mucosal surfaces actually talk to each other through inflammatory or anti-inflammatory cytokines, which again are the little messengers that are secreted from immune cells, and that's how they really communicate with each other. So if you want to have that conversation be anti-inflammatory and immune preparatory, then probiotics are really helpful in that way. Now, which probiotics, right? Probiotics there's so many on the market. I usually go with very specific brands that I use here in Australia and recommend to my patients overseas as well. But generally speaking, you don't need 20 different strains in a probiotic, just a really good Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium, either lactis or longum, or a number of those. So maybe 2-3 Lactobacillus and 2-3 Bifidobacterium are really helpful. And I like the ones that actually have like strain numbers behind, so you can have a look at that. Another good resource for you might be to check out the Probiotic Advisor, which is Dr. Jason Horala. You can check that out. But probiotics are really helpful in that. Don't get shelf-stable ones. Get the ones in the refrigerator in the health food store, those kinds of things. Another really good probiotic to increase specifically secretory IgA is Saccharomyces boulardii, which is not really a bacterial probiotic. It's more of a yeast probiotic. And For that reason, I don't always recommend it, because my patient demographic tends to be fairly ill and has a lot of fungal problems, and many people that have excessive yeast can actually react to this probiotic. But the general public and people that don't have a yeast allergy, Saccharomyces boulardii has some good evidence behind that it does increase secretory IgA. And again, this is this little doggy bone here that surrounds this pathogen right up in the upper part of this graphic. So that's what it does. It just sort of like kills organisms, takes them out that are not meant to be there. So secretory IgA is really important. Stress decreases it. That's why we need to not get overwhelmed and traumatized by what's happening, and staying in the moment. Other than that, Saccharomyces boulardii does show to increase secretory IgA specifically, and probiotics in general have a good body of research to show that they can prevent colds and flus. Then vitamins, particular vitamins to help increase immune response would be vitamin C, vitamin D, and vitamin A. Vitamin D, if you're really, really northern latitude, it's going to be difficult for you to get a good full dose just exposing your body to the sun. But here in Australia, we got like too much sun, right? But 10 minutes in the sun, as much body or skin exposed as possible. If you can do a little longer, that's good. Be careful of the UV, of course. But vitamin D has some incredible immune properties as well. So vitamin D is helpful if you can't get into the sun. About 1,000 IUs of vitamin D, perhaps a bit more for some people, because vitamin D tends to be very low, especially you northerners in the UK. I think I have some people that are joining us from the UK, but also from the US. You're just coming out of your winter, so a lot of people are actually vitamin D depleted. And there's some thought that colds and flus really thrive in that environment. Both vitamin D and zinc are really important for immune function. Zinc, as I mentioned, about 30 milligrams to 50 milligrams, depending on if you know, a lot of other supplements have zinc, so be careful of that. And zinc, you can get quite nauseous if you take too much, so don't take too much. If you get really nauseous, that's probably the zinc, so you may need less. And B vitamins. So B vitamins are helpful for the stress response, right? So if you are somebody who's just really reeling from what is happening, I would suggest that you really find a method of calming that really works for you. Some people, it's meditation. Some people, it's walking in nature, unless you are currently in isolation or quarantine. Obviously, that's a bit limiting, but exercise can really help with stress reduction as well. And there are herbs that are very, very helpful for general immune function as well as general antiviral activity. Again, we don't know if these will work for COVID-19, but my top herbs would be astragalus, would also be andrographis, and olive leaf extract. Those would be very helpful. Echinacea is a wonderful herb for general immune stimulation, and those herbs have really shown some good evidence to be helpful to protect against, especially echinacea. We know echinacea has a good track record with immune stimulation and flu and cold prevention. Then something really, really helpful from Dr. Jason Horolak. He's posted this, and I think it's great to share, is actually gargling with green tea. And let me show this. This is actually backed by science, right? So gargling with green tea has been shown, especially so gargling and then drinking the green tea has been shown to reduce the risk of contracting influenza and the common cold. So the tannins in the green tea have broad antiviral effects topically, and in one study, residents in an aged care facility that did that had something like 15 times less the incidence of cold and flu, which is in this particular article. So if you want to read more about this, the PubMed number, all you need to do is if you go to pubmed.gov and you put in, I can't even read that with my glasses on, but 16970,537, you come up with this article. Green tea is wonderful also for your microbiome. It's a wonderful polyphenol. And so the benefit of that plus the heat. So we know already that the viruses love to hang out in your upper respiratory tract before they move down, or at least COVID-19 does. So doing things like drinking a lot of hot liquids, doing now the gargling with green tea, you only need to do something like a half a cup 3 times a day, gargling and swallowing, but I would probably drink 3 cups a day. That's pretty safe to do. Organic, loose leaf, and the way I like to do my green tea is you get a French press, one of those glass cylinder ones, maybe you get an 8 ounce, which is, that is, hang on, I know this, not 8 ounce, but 16 ounce you can do, that's 2 cups, so 500 mil. And you put a couple of tablespoons of green tea or maybe a bit more, and you steep it for 5 minutes. You pour that into a teapot, and then you steep those wet leaves again. And that increases the antioxidants, right? So you can either make it a really strong cup of green tea, or if you're sensitive to caffeine, you can do it in a double steep with these leaves, right? And then you mix those 2 brews together, and then you drink that during the day. So heat is really good, and gargling with green tea, who knew, right? And so, but coming back to heat, with there's also some thought about saunas. There were some very interesting posts about heat and inhaling heat, having quite a good antiviral activity. So if you do have the luxury of having a sauna or having access to a sauna, another good possibility or method is to have a steam inhalation. So this would be, let's say you have a bit of a sore throat. You can boil some water, make it not too scalding hot, but enough to put your face over, put a towel over your head, and maybe add some drops of either rosemary, thyme, or eucalyptus to this hot water. And inhalation of that is also really effective. So, you know, a lot of strategies that we have that we usually recommend for the common cold and for flu or prevention are pretty effective for those kinds of organisms or viruses. So there's no reason to think that this is not going to have at least a partial effect. So yeah, I think that's all I need to say about that. So we have supplements. It's interesting because supplements also are starting to fly off the shelves, and there's this huge interest in immune herbs, obviously. But there are a lot of things you can do also at home. Like I've just said, you can just lie in the sun if you can't find vitamin D. Oh, forgot to talk about vitamin A. So vitamin A actually is the forgotten sort of fat-soluble vitamin. But it turns out it's really actually quite antiviral as well. And it does have this affinity for the lung. And I often use it when people have viral infections or have leaky gut. So leaky gut is something that, again, is beyond the topic of this, but it's something I've talked about in other Facebook Lives. So you can look at the archives at the SIBO Doctor video library. There is a talk I did on leaky gut, so have a look there. And yeah, I think that's about all I need to say about gut health and immunity. Probably a whole lot more to say. Everyone's a little discombobulated. I might take a couple of questions. Somebody says, I have high IgA in the gut. Does that indicate that I may not be making enough cortisol? No, Lynn. That's not, so high IgA, when you have a CDSA or complete digestive stool analysis, for example, and secretory IgA is up, what that usually means is that there is there's some response. You probably have, often I find that with people that have leaky gut, they can have, it's basically a little bit of an alarm. Your immune system is saying, hey, what's happening? There's too much going on here. So it can be leaky gut, it can be food allergies, those kinds of things. But typically with a lot of stress, I see a low secretory IgA, although secretory IgA on a CDSA or complete digestive stool analysis that a lot of practitioners are doing when they're gut focused, that looks at your microbiome and how you digest food and all that, that actually is not the most accurate of markers. A good way of actually assessing secretory IgA is doing blood levels or mucosal, there's swabs and things like that. But unless you get sick, if you get sick all the time, then checking secretory IgA levels is helpful in that way. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. I'm gonna get rid of this one, hang on, and I'm gonna go back to this, okay. Is Saccharomyces boulardii okay if you have candida but no known yeast allergy? Yes, great question, Andrea. So yes, that is definitely a good thing to do, because so there's 3 good things that Saccharomyces boulardii does. So Saccharomyces boulardii is, again, a beneficial yeast that in research has shown to increase secretory IgA, increase adherence of good probiotics by something like 60%. And it is actually in and of itself a good antifungal because it crowds out. It's not a colonizer, so it doesn't tend to stick around. Not many things are colonizers, but so it is something that's transient if you're taking it. So you need to keep taking it to have that sort of immune beneficial effect. Yeah, but it's a good question. But I have seen people react to it, especially those that are mold sensitive and those that are have a lot of yeast allergy. But for those that don't have that, it tends to be a pretty good product. Okay, let's see if there are any other questions. I don't usually take questions, but why not? We're all here together and might as well answer some questions. And let's see here if somebody comes up with another good question. Other than that, basically, again, we'll make some announcements about the meditation class from Sarita, with Sarita Ford. We'll also probably post some other types of immune stimulant home treatments, which are going to be really helpful for those of you that are self-isolated. And homeopathic or hydrotherapeutic home treatments are really helpful to generally tonify the immune system. So we might post that as well, because we have that in our clinic. We're doing an email sort of send out to people that are at home that can do these things. So we might include the SIBO Doctor Facebook page as well with these tips. We have a what's called a warming sock treatment that's great for upper respiratory stuff, and we have something called a short wrap. And the short wrap is, or if you want to hear more about hydrotherapy, you can go to the SIBODoctor.com and go to the podcast and listen to Kate Broderick, the talk I did with, or the interview I did with Dr. Kate Broderick, who talks about hydrotherapy and how that works, or using water. So this is a great way to boost your whole system. It's also very stress relieving, and it relieves your what's called your sympathetic nervous system, or your fight or flight, which everybody's fight or flight is activated right now. So remember your 5, 4, 3, 2, 1s that I talked about, and or meditation or exercise, those types of things are really helpful. Gargling with green tea as a, but also as a treatment. We're all in this together. Remember, we'll get through this. We have always gotten through this. And the fact that, what I'm sort of blown away by, that first of all, none of us have ever experienced anything like this. And knowing that I'm not alone in that everyone faces the same fears about their finances, about their parents, about their family, about the uncertainty where we're going, that means something, that we all can feel that we all understand what that feels like. So by definition, we're not alone in it, which means we can together forge the future that we want. We're not going to have to be victims necessarily of what is to come, because we're all feeling the same thing and we can all make changes. So on that front, I am hopeful that, you know, there are some positives, like, you know, there's some positives already about how pollution is going down and how things are actually, if we don't tap into the fear so much, that this is not this is a very finite moment in history, so it's not going to go on forever. Okay, having said all that, I will sign off, and I hope you found this useful. And let's see if I wanted to say anything final to that. Stay tuned. I'll have some other posts about, like I said, hydrotherapy and meditation and stress relief, and I will see you again very soon. Until then, stay safe, pick up a hobby, read books, do something that brings you joy, and stay in the moment. So until the next time, I'll see you then. Take care.